Hi, this is Norman BR with the Sales Readiness Group, and I'm very excited to be sharing with you some of our thoughts about turning sales managers into highly effective coaches. And we think about sales managers, they have a lot of different responsibilities, and we'll touch on those responsibilities in a little bit more detail. But they have hiring responsibilities, managing performance, managing the sales pipeline, leading and motivating their team, and they deal with a lot of other issues just related to customer issues, people issues, management forecasts. When we ultimately think about, what really makes a great manager, I would put sales coaching at the very top of that list. So again, excited to go through this session with you, and want to start, for those of you who are not familiar with the Sales Readiness Group, just a little bit about the scope of our offerings. We are focused on selling skills for sales organizations, really focusing on skills like prospecting, call planning, questioning, and active listening skills to understand needs, presenting value, managing feedback, negotiating, closing skills. We also offer a number of advanced sales offerings around areas like value-driven negotiating, value-driven selling, and presentation skills. And then really tying into with today's topic, we have a wonderful program called the High Impact Sales Manager. In fact, we just released a book that's a synopsis of that program, and that covers managing sales performance, sales leadership, recruiting and selecting stars, and today's topic, sales coaching. So with that, I really want to think about how someone moves from sales to sales management, and this is a wonderful pipeline. I want to give credit to Ram Charan, who developed the pipeline, but it shows kind of the natural progression as someone proceeds in their career from a salesperson to potentially a sales manager, maybe over time a VP of sales, and even an organizational leader. And you'll notice that there are these U-turns, or they're marked with the word turn, as are promoted from one position to the next. And probably the most difficult turn is that promotion from salesperson to sales manager. And if you think about that, it's sales managers and salespeople have a very different skill set. So a sales manager has to be proficient with the skills that you would want a rep to be proficient in. So if they came up from the sales ranks, probably not a problem. They would understand how to prospect, use questioning skills, manage objections, gain commitment. And they need those skills because those are the exact skills they're going to be coaching their reps on. But the job of a sales manager is much broader. They need how to set team goals. They need to recruit and select salespeople, coach, which we're talking about now, manage performance, lead, and motivate. So there's no reason to necessarily expect someone who's promoted from the sales ranks to necessarily have these sales management skills. So these are skills that really require training and development. And, often we think about this idea that the best players don't always make the best coaches. So one of my favorite pro basketball players was Isaiah Thomas. Phenomenal athlete, 13 seasons, I think 12 All-Star appearances. But his coaching record, pretty mediocre. And then you look at, Phil Jackson, who wasn't a remarkable player by any means, but when it came to coaching was a phenomenal coach. And it's not to say that someone who's a great player can't be a great coach. There's a lot of star athletes that are promoted and do very well in coaching. The real issue is a different mindset and it's a different skill set, and that's what we really want to focus on in this session. So I mentioned before, and I'll just touch briefly on three other areas. So the sales manager is really responsible for hiring the best people and holding them accountable, managing sales performance by focusing on the underlying behaviors that drive sales results, producing accurate sales forecasts, and leading and motivating and inspiring their team. But the area that we have highlighted here is really coaching. And this is, as I mentioned before, probably the single most important skill for a sales manager to develop. So let's dive into coaching a little bit. And so we think about coaching, the focus is really on skills and knowledge or the use of strategy to improve results. So when we think about results kind of at a high level, it's either can we get more opportunities? So a lot of companies say we just don't have enough in our pipeline. So that would be the issue of getting more opportunities. Or we want to do a better job of closing what's in our pipeline, which would be better win rates. So we think about coaching. Coaching is designed to help with strategies and skills that either allow you to create more new opportunities or do a much more effective job with the opportunities that you're working on. Ideally, you'd be doing both. So with that, I want to kind of segment into two types of coaching: opportunity coaching and skills coaching. And I'll start a little bit with opportunity coaching. So opportunity coaching is really often referred to as deal coaching. So it's basically about sales strategies for a specific sales opportunity. So if I'm a manager and I'm meeting with a sales rep and we're going through their sales pipeline, I may notice that some opportunities have been in a certain stage for a period of time, or a salesperson may tell me, "Boy, I'm doing really well with my contacts, but I'm not able to get to the decision makers." Or there may be some competitive issue that arose. So opportunity coaching is really the opportunity for you as a sales manager to coach to a specific deal in the pipeline. And I just want to share with you, actually this is from the book, The High Impact Sales Manager, just some questions you might want to think about when you're providing opportunity coaching. So the first question I always like to ask is, what is the customer's business need? Because I think so often we focus on what we're selling and don't necessarily make sure that we really align it to a business need. So this is an opportunity for you to really coach the rep and make sure they've really done a good job of asking questions, understanding pain points, understanding the business need. In other words, how is a customer going to be better off by going forward with our product or service or solution? Another key question is, what is the unique value that we're bringing? In other words, we shouldn't expect that we don't have competition. So we want to be able to coach the salesperson and really have them explain to us why it is that our solution is different than maybe the other types of solutions the customer might be looking at. Problem that we often see is that we're not really getting to the decision makers. So one of the questions we want to ask is, so who are the decision makers? How will they go about making this decision? And do we have a relationship with them? So it's also a very interesting question to ask to really figure out how much more work that we need to do to really access those decision makers. Another key thought would be, well, how will the competition try and beat us? A good salesperson always knows their competition, so really probing about who is a competition and what are they going to do to try and win. And then ultimately, my favorite question, why will we win? And I think if the salesperson's kind of not real clear there definitely is more work to do. We want salespeople that are very confident that we have the best solution on the table, and that we're going to win. The good news is most sales managers are really very good at opportunity coaching, and that's because they came up from the sales ranks, and these are probably the exact issues they've dealt with in the past. But if we look at skills coaching, that really is kind of new territory for a sales manager. So now they're going to work on helping salespeople get better at areas like prospecting, asking questions, managing objections. So this is really helping salespeople improve their selling skills. So, one of the questions that often comes up is, how much of a sales manager's time should be focused on sales coaching? There's no perfect answer, but based on some analysis that we've seen, 25 to 40%. So if you think about hiring, attending meetings, forecasting, pipeline reviews, those are all important, but 25 to 40% of the time should really be focused on sales coaching. That's a dedicated time really focused on working with your sales team to help them improve selling skills. And the wonderful thing about coaching, and I'm thinking about a wonderful article that was written by one of my business partners about this whole issue of leverage. And so the average sales manager has about 7 to 10 salespeople reporting to them. So if you think about just the ability to kind of get this 1 to 7 or 1 to 10 leverage by improving skills. So I think sometimes sales managers make the mistake and think that their job is when they actually go on a call to actually sell. But their real goal is to empower their salespeople so that their salespeople can sell better, because what the sales manager is not taking into account if they start actually doing the selling is, how about all the other calls that I'm not on? And is my salesperson really proficient in those skills? And when you empower people, you also spend a lot less time really putting out fires. So I think a lot of managers run from one challenge to the next challenge, but they really are not making a lot of progress. Whereas when you empower people, you're really training them to start to solve some of their own problems. So let's talk a little bit about, just some data. So, when you think about coaching programs, this is a wonderful analysis that was done by CSO Insights. It was a report that they issued. It's in their 2015 sales optimization study, and they surveyed a wide variety of sales organizations who kind of said, well, let's take a look at our coaching programs. Do they need improvement? Do coaching skills meet expectations, or do they exceed expectations? And the data supporting companies that have coaching skills that exceed expectations is just remarkable as it relates to new opportunities, avoiding discounting by selling value, and overall plan attainment. So the business case for sales coaching is really powerful. And that business case for sales coaching is actually covered in a section of this report. And the report's complimentary, so there's information here on how you can download the report. But it has wonderful statistics in it with regard to how much companies are spending on sales training, what are some of the benefits of sales training, and just some statistics showing the correlation between great sales training programs and business results. And then specifically, there's a section on sales managers and sales coaching that includes the data that I just shared with you. So again, it's a complimentary report, and feel free to download that. So when we think about coaching, I think everyone who's joining us today and most managers and sales professionals definitely believe in coaching. In fact, it's one of the most frequently Googled terms, sales coaching. So when we think about, everyone understands that it's important, and yet very few managers make the time to really do this on a regular basis. And so we've run a number of very interactive webinars, and we've done some polls, and some of the reasons we've found is one of the reasons managers don't coach is they simply don't know how to coach. Another is they're really not sure what to coach on because they haven't done an assessment, and we'll talk about assessment in just a couple of minutes, so they really don't know what they're supposed to be coaching on. They may be spending their time on the wrong reps. One of the things we see with some managers is that they're almost always trying to coach their bottom performers. And that really doesn't make a lot of sense unless it's a new hire. If you think about it, if your bottom performers may not even be the right fit for your organization and may actually take up too much of your time, we'll get into that a little bit more as well when we talk about assessment. But a kind of a good rule of thumb is that the purpose of coaching is to move the middle. Let's say you have a team of 10 reps, and there are kind of 2 on the bottom, 2 are at the top, and 6 in the middle. Boy, if you can just get a little bit of improvement from those 6 in the middle and move them from average to above average performers, just a huge impact on sales and your bottom line. And I actually would say probably middle performers first. Well, I'd say new hires first, middle performers second, high performers third, and actually your bottom performers probably the least amount of coaching time. But everyone should get some coaching. Another reason managers may not coach is there just may not be a consistent coaching process. So I want to coach, but I've never been trained on how to coach, and I don't know what the process is. And then another problem we see is if there isn't a coaching culture, the salesperson could say, boy, why does my manager want to coach me? And they may not view coaching as positive. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how to create a coaching mindset and a coaching culture. And if you think about the best sales organizations, coaching's part of their culture. And, if you think about professional athletes, the best golfers in the world are always getting coaching. So we don't want coaching to be viewed as remedial or confrontational. It should be viewed as part of the culture of continuous improvement. We want everyone, irrespective of how good they are at what they do, to become even better. And that includes the managers themselves. So when we think about coaching, I like to think about this in terms of the mindset, what to coach on, and how to coach. So actually did a series of interviews for for Selling Power Magazine, and we called the first one the mindset, the why of sales coaching, the analysis piece, the what of sales coaching, and the coaching piece, which gets to the process, the how of sales coaching. So let's start with the mindset. The mindset's really important because not everyone understands the difference between managing and coaching, but managing is a little bit more directive, and coaching is much more on the side. So you're there to actually help people get better, and I think that some managers kind of suffer from when is it appropriate to coach, and when should I use some other kind of management action. But the most important thing is to really make sure you have a coaching mindset. And there's a wonderful framework. It's called the 3 A's framework, and we'll talk about that shortly. So the 3 A's framework is key to really that coaching mindset. And what it means is ask first. So don't go into tell mode. So telling is not a great thing when it comes to coaching. Ask first. Actively listen, and that really means listen with the intent to understand, and not just listening to the words, asking questions to clarify, looking at body language, so really understanding what it is you're hearing from your salesperson, and then assume the best of intentions. So I think sometimes, we have a tendency to be a little bit cynical. When we're coaching, we should assume that the person wants to improve. So again, ask first, actively listen so you really understand the salesperson's perspective, and then assume they do want to get better. So that helps build that coaching mindset for you as a manager. And when it starts to get broader than that and get, really spread across all your managers, you start to have a company that has a coaching culture. So now we get to, when is it appropriate to coach? Because as a manager, I not only coach, I may have to do performance counseling, I may have to direct people, I may have to communicate expectations, may even have to terminate people. So there's a lot of different things I need to do as a manager. So how do I know when coaching is appropriate? And I'm going to share with you a tool we use in our coaching program that we think really helps kind of determine when coaching will be most effective. So if we go back to this notion of skills, and let's just say prospecting, because that's at the very beginning of selling skills. People may not want to prospect, so that would be a motivation issue. I don't want to, I don't like it, I'm bored with it, I don't think it's very productive. So those might be all reasons salesperson may not want to prospect. Another reason salespeople may not want to prospect is they don't know how, they don't understand, they don't have the information tools. That would get to proficiency. So it's really important when you think about coaching to assess the salespeople across a whole range of skills, to plot those skills, and I'll share with you kind of our system for plotting those skills. Have the salesperson do their own assessment, and then sit down with the salesperson, really identify kind of where there's a commonality in your view, maybe explore where there's differences, and start developing, based on this assessment, customized sales coaching plans for each member of your team. And we recommend quarterly coaching plans where you focus on 1 to 2 key skill areas. So if you have 7 people, you'd have 7 coaching plans, each with 1 to 2 skills. And that would form the basis for the work they would do to improve in those skill areas during the course of that calendar quarter. As you get to the end of the quarter, you can sit down and review. There's been enough progress, you can update the plans and focus on other skills. So what we call this is the development matrix. It has on the left-hand axis motivation. On the horizontal axis, it has proficiency. And if you think about it, you start with someone who maybe is very motivated. So you've got a new sales hire. They're motivated to prospect, but they don't know how. Then the right management action would be to train them and then to coach them, because it's not a matter of not having a desire to do something. It's simply a matter of they don't have the skills yet. So that, is when training would be most appropriate. Now you've got someone who's not motivated and they're not proficient. So in this case, you will need to direct, and that's really telling them what your expectation is and what they need to do. So I would just say that if a salesperson has too many skills that fall in the directing area, where they don't have the skills and they don't have the motivation, the position's probably not a great fit. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to have to direct if it's just in one skill or an occasional reminder. But if that's becoming kind of the normal mode of management, then I think there's probably a deeper issue with the fit for that sales professional. Here's one we often see with veterans, especially as it relates to something like prospecting. They know how to prospect. They did that early in their career. They're good at it. They just don't want to do it anymore. They've kind of lost the desire. And so at this point, kind of coaching them on how isn't going to be effective. They know how, they just don't want to. And so you really have to sit down with them and kind of figure out, well, what's going on? Maybe you only want to assign them to mature accounts and reassign some of their accounts. Maybe you want to explain to them that even though it may not be something they want to do, it is a core element of their job and you expect them to do a certain amount of time. But this is really something you want to sit down, kind of explore what's driving the lack of motivation and see what action would be most appropriate to get them to actually either be productive in that area or move that responsibility elsewhere. Kind of the area we'd all want to be in, and the whole purpose of coaching is really to empower someone. So if you're fortunate to have people who have skills where they're really good, they're high proficiency, and they're really motivated, let those people kind of run with it. So if you have someone who's great at, let's say, negotiating, and you've got an important negotiation, let them lead the conversation on that. That's how you empower people, and they're going to get better. You can even use them to help you coach other sales reps on areas they're particularly strong in. But as we look at this holistically, the biggest area on this matrix is the center, coaching. And that gets really to the idea that most skills will be kind of average motivation, average proficiency. And those are the ones that lend themselves to coaching. And kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, is we want to focus on how we're going to move the middle, and that the purpose of coaching is to help them build the skills so that they become empowered and they can work on other areas in the future. And this coaching area breaks itself down, and that's a little hard to read, so I'm going to expand that here, to 5 key areas. So once you understand, you develop the coaching plan, as I mentioned, maybe quarterly. So that's your first step. Develop that coaching plan focused on 1 to 2 key skills, making sure there's buy-in from the sales rep because they also did their own assessment that you sat down and you discussed with them. They're getting ready to go on a call. You want to conduct a pre-call briefing. Okay, what's the history here? Who are we working on? How much business have we done before? What are the call objectives? And you also want to be very clear as to what specific skills you're going to coach on. So I might remind someone, as I mentioned before, what I really want to kind of observe in this call is how you manage objections. So that would be something to be very fair to observe. The third area is call observation. I think this is the area that managers struggle with, particularly when it's in-person selling. So let's say you're going out on a sales call with one of your salespeople. There's really 3 roles you could play. You could actually sell, so you and your salesperson are both going out on a sales call. You've decided that it's a huge opportunity. Maybe your salesperson's asked for help. I would describe that as a joint sales call. So it's not a coaching call. The purpose of the call is not to coach your salesperson, but it's really to go out there and close business, and that's appropriate sometimes. You may have a brand new person. You might say, you know what, I want you to watch. I'm going to kind of lead this call because I want you to understand the type of questions we ask to uncover needs, so you join me. In that case, that would really be a call where you're modeling the behavior, and that might be appropriate for a new person or someone who's struggling in a particular area. But again, it's not a coaching call. And then the third type of call is a coaching call, and that's when you're actually observing. And, maybe the salesperson handles the customer introduction. You might explain that you're pleased to be joining that salesperson and you're really coming in to observe. And then letting the salesperson run the sales call. You take a few notes while they're going along. If the customer asks you a question, you comment briefly and probably steer it back to the salesperson because your goal is to observe and really see how, what skill level is that salesperson at, particularly in those specific areas that are part of the coaching plan. Then following that call, you want to debrief. And we'll talk a little bit about the debrief in more detail. And then follow up as to how things are going, areas for improvement. And ultimately, as they start to build the skills, looking at their coaching plan and updating the coaching plan. And the reason I mentioned the debrief is I think this is an area managers struggle with a lot. So I think there's a lot managers can do better in every one of these 5 areas. But the debrief in particular is a challenging area because you go on a sales call, you're observing, and you're likely to see some things that didn't go so well, and you can't resist the temptation to necessarily share what didn't go well. But in fact, that's a huge error, and it really doesn't allow for performance improvement. Instead, here's kind of a model I just want to share with you. So the first thing you want to do, maybe this is you go to a coffee shop after the meeting, or maybe you're going to another meeting and you've got a long car ride. You probably want to share something they did positive. So one of my business partners often says, catch them doing something right. There must have been something they did well. And you want to just comment and say, I think that was really great the way you started to ask some questions to understand their needs. So find something that they did well. And then you really want to lead self-discovery. So your salesperson might say to you, well, so how do you think that went? Say, as I mentioned, I do have some thoughts that I'd love to share with you, but give me your perspective first. So what we want to do is always let the salesperson kind of critique the call and provide their input first. We may actually find that they're a harsher critic than we are, or they've even self-discovered some of the things we're going to point out. The benefit of that is if they see it for themselves, they're more likely to make that change. So perhaps, during that debrief, they missed some of the key points that you wanted to make. At that point, you say, it's really good. I wanted to understand your perspective. I also wanted to share with you that I noted X, Y, and Z. And then you want to give them a chance to provide some practice. So I noticed when the customer raised pricing as an objection, you said, we could discount that by 5%. And, we certainly have the right, the prerogative to, but it's not very good for the company, certainly not very good for you from a commission standpoint. So let's just role play that again. If the customer asked for a discount, how else could you have responded? And then you want to check for agreement. So the debrief is really important. Just summarize something positive they did first, lead them in self-discovery, then provide some feedback and practice, and then really check for agreement. So, I covered some of these areas before, but self-discovery is important. Change is owned by the salesperson, not the coach. Again, they discover it for themselves. I think it creates a more positive coaching experience. Again, the purpose of the coaching is for the salesperson's benefit. We learn the salesperson's perspective before we comment. So back to the 3 A's, we want to actively listen and understand before we start to share our view. So some ideas that just around self-discovery is, what we call the, what, so what, and now what, or, using training terms, observation, reflection, application. So, what else did you learn in this call? What surprised you? So if that were to, happen, so what happened next after they raised a pricing objection? Now what would you do next? So these are just some examples of types of questions you can ask to really elicit a response from the salesperson. Again, so, what surprised you? What did you notice? So what happened next? So based on what you learned, what would you do differently next time? Really just good coaching questions to start creating that coaching dialogue. So a couple of key takeaways from today's session. Most managers don't know how to coach, but it's something they can learn. Sales coaching creates leverage. Sales manager can basically improve the people on their team. Sometimes those teams have as many as 7 to 10 sales professionals, so you can get a lot of leverage. Sales coaching is the best action for moving the middle, so you really want to focus on skills that are kind of in that coaching quadrant. Coaching mindset. Again, we want to think about the 3 A's frameworks and leading self-discovery, and using a defined coaching process so you have great consistency in how you coach your people, or if you have, also great consistency across your managers. And a lot of the content for today's session on sales coaching came from our High Impact Sales Manager coaching program. We recently introduced a synopsis of that in book form, so you can order that go to highimpactsalesmanager.com. But it not only covers coaching, it also covers hiring the best people, managing performance, managing the pipeline, sales leadership. Pretty quick read. So hopefully it's something you would really enjoy and can learn from. You can also learn a lot more by following us on LinkedIn. We're active bloggers. We publish a lot of content. So I'd encourage you to do that. And then now that we're kind of approaching the end, just want to thank you and give you some additional information. So if you want to contact us, are interested in learning more about sales coaching, sales management, sales training, or just having a conversation, feel free to email us or give us a call. And again, I encourage you to read our blog, which you can sign up for on our website. So with that, I want to thank you. I hope this has been a productive session, and look forward to conducting future sessions on other sales and sales management topics. Organizations really focusing on skills like prospecting, call planning, questioning, and active listening skills to understand needs, presenting value, managing feedback, negotiating, closing skills. We also offer a number of advanced sales offerings around areas like value-driven negotiating, value-driven selling, and presentation skills. And then really tying into with today's topic, we have a wonderful program called the High Impact Sales Manager. In fact, we just released a book that's a synopsis of that program, and that covers managing sales performance, sales leadership, recruiting and selecting stars, and today's topic, sales coaching. So with that, I really want to think about how someone moves from sales to sales management. And this is a wonderful pipeline. I want to give credit to Ram Charan, who developed the pipeline, but it shows kind of the natural progression as someone proceeds in their career from a salesperson to potentially a sales manager, maybe over time a VP of sales, and even an organizational leader. And you'll notice that there are these U-turns, or they're marked with the word turn, as are promoted from one position to the next. And probably the most difficult turn is that promotion from salesperson to sales manager. And if you think about that, it's sales managers and salespeople have a very different skill set. So a sales manager has to be proficient with the skills that you would want a rep to be proficient in. So if they came up from the sales ranks, probably not a problem. They would understand how to prospect, use questioning skills, manage objections, gain commitment. And they need those skills because those are the exact skills they're going to be coaching their reps on. But the job of a sales manager is much broader. They need how to set team goals. They need to recruit and select salespeople, coach, which we're talking about now, manage performance, lead, and motivate. So there's no reason to necessarily expect someone who's promoted from the sales ranks to necessarily have these sales management skills. So these are skills that really require training and development. And, often we think about this idea that the best players don't always make the best coaches. So one of my favorite pro basketball players was Isaiah Thomas. Phenomenal athlete, 13 seasons, I think 12 All-Star appearances. But his coaching record, pretty mediocre. And then you look at, Phil Jackson, who wasn't a remarkable player by any means, but when it came to coaching was a phenomenal coach. And it's not to say that someone who's a great player can't be a great coach. There's a lot of star athletes that are promoted and do very well in coaching. The real issue is a different mindset and it's a different skill set. And that's what we really want to focus on in this section. Hi, this is Norman BR with the Sales Readiness Group, and I'm very excited to be sharing with you some of our thoughts about turning sales managers into highly effective coaches. And we think about sales managers, they have a lot of different responsibilities. We'll touch on those responsibilities in a little bit more detail, but they have hiring responsibilities, managing performance, managing the sales pipeline, leading and motivating their team, and they deal with a lot of other issues just related to customer issues, people issues, management forecasts. When we ultimately think about, what really makes a great manager, I would put sales coaching at the very top of that list. So, again, excited to go through this session with you, and want to start, for those of you who are not familiar with the Sales Readiness Group, just a little bit about the scope of our offerings. We have focus on selling skills for sales organization. So I mentioned before, and I'll just touch briefly on three other areas. So the sales manager is really responsible for hiring the best people and holding them accountable, managing sales performance by focusing on the underlying behaviors that drive sales results, producing accurate sales forecasts, and leading and motivating and inspiring their team. But the area that we have highlighted here is really coaching. And this is, as I mentioned before, probably the single most important skill for a sales manager to develop. So let's dive into coaching a little bit. And so we think about coaching, the focus is really on skills and knowledge or the use of strategy to improve results. So when we think about results kind of at a high level, it's either can we get more opportunities? So a lot of companies say we just don't have enough in our pipeline. So that would be the issue of getting more opportunities.